The jungle was alive, and not in a gentle way. Every sound felt magnified in the thick, humid air, the chirping of insects, the distant cries of animals, the creak of branches as unseen creatures moved above and around her. The leaves dripped with moisture, and the thick undergrowth tore at her clothes and scratched her skin as she struggled to move forward. Her body ached in ways she could hardly describe. She had been left behind, abandoned by her own group, and now every step felt like a battle against exhaustion, pain, and fear. Her ankle throbbed violently, every movement sending sharp jolts of pain up her leg. A deep gash on her arm had dried partially, but blood still trickled down her skin in slow, sticky lines. Her mouth was dry, her throat parched, and the weight of hopelessness pressed on her chest. She had tried to keep pace with her companions earlier in the day, but an unexpected slip had left her sprawling across the forest floor, vulnerable and exposed. By the time she had struggled to her feet, her group had already disappeared into the distance, leaving her with nothing but the cruel sound of their departing footsteps and the jungle's indifferent whispers. She paused for a moment, leaning against the rough bark of a tree, trying to catch her breath. Her head spun from fatigue, the relentless sun of the afternoon beating down on her back. She closed her eyes, listening to the jungle, trying to find a familiar rhythm or pattern. But there was nothing familiar here, only danger, only isolation, only the haunting thought that she might not survive the night. Help someone. Her voice was weak, hoarse, almost swallowed by the thick air. She called out again, desperation growing in her chest. Please, anyone. But the jungle did not answer. Only the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a monkey, and the occasional snap of a twig responded. It was as if the world itself had abandoned her along with her group. Hours passed, though she had lost track of time. The sun began to dip behind the dense canopy, and shadows stretched across the forest floor. Every rustle, every distant sound made her jump. She stumbled, fell, and pulled herself back up again, forcing her body forward. There was a small stream ahead, a faint glimmer of silver in the fading light, and she crawled toward it, hoping for water, hoping for life. By the time she reached the stream, her legs had begun to give way beneath her. She collapsed on the muddy bank, gasping and shivering despite the sweat that covered her body. The cool water trickled over her fingers as she splashed it on her face, trying to wake herself from the dizzying haze of pain and fear. But it was no use. Her mind wavered, drifting dangerously close to unconsciousness. Then she heard it, a sharp, deliberate snap of a twig. Somewhere not far from her, someone or something was moving through the undergrowth. Her heart leapt. She wanted to cry out, but her voice had all but disappeared. She simply froze, eyes wide, scanning the shadows. The rustling grew closer. A figure emerged from the darkness. He was tall, strong, and moved with careful, deliberate steps. His clothes were practical, suited for survival in the wild, and he carried a spear-like weapon, its tip sharp and glinting in the dim light. His eyes, however, were the first thing she noticed, calm, intelligent, and watchful, assessing the environment with a careful precision that made her heart pound in cautious hope. "Are you hurt?" His voice was calm but urgent, carrying a firmness that somehow gave her strength to nod. I think I'll die here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chorus of the jungle. He shook his head firmly. "Not on my watch." Before she could question him further, he crouched down and extended a steady hand. She hesitated for only a moment before letting him support her, feeling the surprising strength in his grip. Every step was careful, methodical, as he guided her through the undergrowth, avoiding the thickets and roots that could trip them both. As they moved, he kept scanning the shadows, listening to the jungle's subtle warnings. Every rustle, every distant howl he seemed to anticipate. His confidence was unlike anything she had seen before, as if he belonged here, while she had always been a stranger in a world of survival. She tried to speak again. Who are you?" "Someone who refuses to let you die," he said with a faint, determined smile. The words were simple, but they carried weight she couldn't quite describe. It was not just a statement, it was a promise. And in the middle of a jungle that seemed determined to swallow her alive, it was enough to make her believe that survival was still possible. They moved through the darkness, using a faint path he seemed to know instinctively. She could barely keep her eyes open, exhaustion pulling her down, but she clung to him and the hope he represented. At one point, a distant roar made her heart stop, and she instinctively flinched. But he remained steady, and somehow that steadiness gave her courage. Eventually, they reached a small clearing, hidden under thick vines and partially obscured by large rocks. There, he set her down carefully on a bed of leaves that formed a makeshift resting spot. He moved quickly and efficiently, gathering water from the stream and using leaves and cloth from his pack to clean her wounds. She winced as he tended to the gash on her arm, but there was no hesitation, no uncertainty in his movements. Every action was precise, deliberate, and effective. "Rest now," he said, placing a rough blanket over her shoulders. "You're safe for now." As her eyes grew heavy, she tried to comprehend what had happened. One moment she had been alone, abandoned, with no hope. The next, someone had appeared from the shadows and carried her to safety. There was a strange clarity in that realization. She had been reminded that humans could endure, could care for each other, could fight for life even when the world seemed determined to destroy them. The night deepened. The jungle, once threatening, seemed quieter here, though the occasional rustle reminded her that danger was never far away. She drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, her body and mind surrendering for the first time in what felt like hours. Even in dreams, the fear lingered, images of falling, of being left behind, of predators lurking. But the memory of the man's steady presence gave her a sense of protection she had not felt before. Hours passed, though she barely noticed. When she awoke, the first rays of sunlight had begun to pierce through the canopy, casting dappled light on the forest floor. Her arm throbbed, her ankle still hurt, but she felt alive. And she was not alone. He was there tending a small fire, his attention focused yet relaxed, as if he had been expecting her to wake. "Morning," he said simply. She managed a small, tired smile. "I thank you." He nodded, not saying much more, but the gesture carried more reassurance than words ever could. He handed her a small container of water and some dried food. "You need strength if we're going to move further," he said. As she drank and ate, she studied him, trying to understand who he was, why he was here, and why he had saved her. His presence was a reminder that humans were capable of incredible things: resilience, skill, courage, and compassion, even in the most dangerous and alien environments. And somehow, she knew that survival was not just about fighting nature or predators. It was about trust, hope, and refusing to give up, no matter the odds. The day passed slowly as they prepared to move again. She learned more about him as they walked through the jungle. He was resourceful, intelligent, and skilled in ways that seemed almost instinctual. He found clean water, identified edible plants, and avoided dangers with precision. Every step they took reinforced the realization that humans could endure anything when they refused to surrender. By nightfall, they reached another small clearing. This time, they built a more secure shelter, using branches and vines to create walls that would protect them from predators. As she rested again, she reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. She had expected death, isolation, and despair. Instead, she had found a human who embodied everything remarkable about humanity: courage, compassion, and an unyielding will to survive. And though she was still weak, still vulnerable, a part of her knew that the story of her survival had only just begun. The jungle was far from conquered, and the dangers ahead would test them both in ways they could not yet imagine. But for the first time since she had been left behind, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. She closed her eyes, listening to the night sounds of the jungle. Somewhere out there in the shadows, dangers lurked. But as long as she had a human by her side who refused to let her die, she knew that survival was not only possible, it was inevitable. The sun rose slowly over the dense jungle, casting streaks of golden light through the canopy. The young woman woke to the sound of birdsong and the faint rustle of leaves as the man moved quietly near the camp. Her body ached in places she hadn't realized were injured, but her determination to survive had grown stronger. She looked at him, sitting calmly, surveying the forest with an alert gaze, and wondered how someone could navigate this wilderness with such confidence. He noticed her awake and gave a small nod. "We need to move before it gets too hot. The jungle becomes dangerous in midday." She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in her ankle forced her back down. He moved to her side immediately, examining it carefully. "It's swollen," he said. "You'll need support, or you risk breaking it further." He rummaged through his pack and found a long, sturdy branch, tying it carefully to her leg with strips of cloth. The makeshift splint was rough but effective. "Try walking slowly," he instructed, "and I'll be right beside you." With his support, she took hesitant steps. Each movement sent waves of pain through her body, but she refused to collapse. She was alive, and she would not be left behind again. Every step through the dense undergrowth tested her, but he was patient, guiding her around hidden roots, thorny bushes, and treacherous patches of mud. As they moved, he explained the basics of surviving in the jungle. "You have to respect it," he said. "Every plant, every animal, every sound matters. If you ignore it, it will punish you." He showed her how to identify safe plants for food and water and pointed out signs of dangerous predators. His knowledge seemed instinctual, as if he had spent a lifetime reading the jungle like a book. Hours passed and the sun climbed higher. The heat pressed down on them, heavy and suffocating, yet they pushed forward. She could feel exhaustion setting in, her body screaming for rest, but his presence encouraged her to keep going. He moved with efficiency, never wasting a step, while she followed, learning quickly that survival required constant awareness and adaptability. By late afternoon, they reached a small river. The water was clear and cool, offering a brief respite from the jungle's relentless heat. He helped her sit on the bank and gave her some water. "We'll rest here for a short time. You need strength for what comes next." She watched him as he surveyed the river, noticing the way he scanned for danger with careful precision. She had thought humans were fragile in comparison to the wild, but he seemed to exist as part of it, blending into the environment without disturbing it. There was a power in that skill, a quiet strength that was more impressive than any weapon. Suddenly, a noise from across the river caught their attention, a low growl followed by the rustling of bushes. She froze, heart pounding, as a large shadow emerged from the undergrowth. A massive predator, its eyes gleaming, its movements slow but deliberate, stepped into the clearing. Its fur was mottled, blending perfectly with the forest, and its presence radiated danger. He stood immediately, placing himself between her and the predator. "Stay behind me," he ordered calmly. "Do not make sudden movements." The predator circled, testing them, and she felt the jungle's silence grow heavy. She could see the muscles in its legs tense, the way it sniffed the air, assessing them as potential prey. She wanted to panic, but he remained steady, his gaze locked on the creature. Slowly, he picked up a large branch and waved it in a controlled manner, making himself appear larger. The predator paused as if weighing its options, then turned and slunk back into the shadows, disappearing as silently as it had appeared. Her knees shook as relief flooded her. How did you know what to do?" she asked, awe in her voice. He shrugged, though the corner of his mouth hinted at a small smile. "Experience, observation, patience. The jungle teaches you if you're willing to learn." As the day turned toward evening, they prepared to move again. She was tired, sore, and hungry, but she had learned something vital. Humans had an advantage in their intelligence, adaptability, and ability to plan. The predator relied on instinct, but humans could anticipate, react, and survive through understanding and skill. That night, under the cover of darkness, they camped near a large tree with broad roots that provided natural shelter. He taught her how to make a fire from friction, using dry leaves and small branches. The flames illuminated the clearing, casting flickering shadows across their faces. She watched him work with precision and patience, realizing that survival was not about brute strength. It was about resourcefulness and willpower. While she rested near the fire, she reflected on the events that had brought her here. She had expected to die alone, abandoned and forgotten, but instead, she had found a human who embodied everything remarkable about her species: courage, intelligence, and an unwavering refusal to give up. She realized that being human meant more than just surviving. It meant adapting, learning, and helping others endure even when the odds were stacked against them. During the night, a sudden noise stirred her from sleep. She saw him immediately rise, eyes sharp and alert. A group of smaller predators moved near the camp, attracted by the scent of food and the warmth of the fire. Without hesitation, he grabbed his spear and moved quietly, her following his lead as best she could. He drove them away with controlled movements, never wasting energy, never panicking. By dawn, they were ready to move again. They traveled for hours through dense forest, crossing streams, climbing slopes, and navigating through thick undergrowth. She grew stronger with every step, her confidence slowly returning. She realized that the human ability to endure, to think, and to adapt was what kept them alive in this hostile environment. As they reached a higher elevation, the jungle opened slightly, revealing a hidden valley below. From this vantage point, she could see the true scale of the forest, stretching endlessly in every direction. It was beautiful, terrifying, and incomprehensible all at once. "We're not safe yet," he warned, noting her awe. "The jungle is vast and danger is everywhere, but from here we can plan our next move." He taught her how to observe from a distance, reading animal tracks, listening to subtle changes in the wind, and identifying potential hazards. Every skill he shared reinforced the fact that intelligence, patience, and awareness were as powerful as any weapon in ensuring survival. Hours later, they encountered evidence of other humans, trails of movement, remnants of supplies, and signs of recent activity. It reminded her that humans were everywhere, and even in the wildest, most dangerous places, they left a mark. She realized that humans' greatest strength was not just their physical abilities, but their capacity to think, plan, and overcome obstacles through cooperation and ingenuity. As night fell again, they built another temporary shelter near a small cave. The cave provided protection from predators and the elements. He showed her how to secure it, how to make it defensible, and how to find clean water nearby. She marveled at how he navigated every challenge with calm efficiency, making her realize that survival was not luck, it was skill, preparation, and determination. While resting, she asked him why he had chosen to help her. He looked at her thoughtfully. "Because I can. Because I refuse to let someone die if I can prevent it. Because that is what it means to be human." His words struck her deeply. In this jungle, full of dangers and uncertainty, the most remarkable thing was not the wild animals or the treacherous terrain. It was humans' ability to care, to act, and to survive together. She understood that she had been given a second chance, not because the world had changed, but because humans had the power to make a difference. The next morning, as they prepared to continue their journey, a sudden storm swept through the jungle. Rain poured down in torrents, turning paths into rivers and making every movement treacherous. The man led her carefully, teaching her how to use the environment to their advantage, using large leaves for shelter, finding higher ground to avoid floods, and recognizing signs of unstable terrain. She realized that even in the harshest conditions, human adaptability and intelligence provided a critical edge. During the storm, they discovered an abandoned village hidden deep in the forest. The structures were broken and overgrown, yet they provided temporary shelter. He guided her inside, and together they made a fire, drying their clothes and warming themselves. The village, though deserted, offered clues about the people who had lived there, their ingenuity, their resourcefulness, and their efforts to survive in a harsh world. She saw a reflection of human resilience in the remnants of the village. Days turned into a week, and with each passing day, she grew stronger, more capable, and more aware. She learned to move quietly, to observe the smallest details, to anticipate danger, and to think strategically. The man continued to teach her, pushing her gently, allowing her to discover her own strengths. She realized that humans were not only capable of enduring extreme conditions, but also of learning and growing in response to them. One evening, as they sat near a river, he spoke of a distant settlement where she could find help, food, and rest. "We are close," he said. "But the journey is not over. You must be ready for whatever comes next." She nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She had been left to die, abandoned and alone, but she had discovered a deeper truth. Humanity's greatest strength lay in courage, intelligence, and the refusal to surrender. The jungle had tested her, pushed her to the brink, and forced her to confront her fears. And through it all, she had learned that survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about embracing human potential, learning from experience, and relying on others when necessary. As night fell, they camped once more, the jungle alive with distant sounds. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that the challenges ahead would be formidable. But she also knew that humans were capable of remarkable resilience. The world was dangerous, unpredictable, and relentless, yet with skill, intelligence, and determination, survival was possible. And for the first time since she had been left behind, she believed she could not only survive but thrive, discovering the strength within herself and the enduring power of humanity. The jungle seemed endless, stretching in every direction with its thick canopy, tangled undergrowth, and endless chorus of sounds. Yet the young woman no longer felt the same fear she had when she was abandoned. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable under the guidance of the man who had saved her. Every scar, every scrape, every painful step she had taken had taught her something vital. Humans were more than fragile creatures. They could endure, adapt, and overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable. That morning, the air was thick with humidity, and the mist clung to the trees like a ghostly veil. The man had instructed her to move slowly, keeping her eyes alert for predators and hidden dangers. She followed him closely, feeling the rhythm of the jungle and the subtle patterns of its life. Birds shifted nervously in the branches, insects hummed, and distant roars echoed off the cliffs. She had learned to read these signs, understanding when to move cautiously, when to hide, and when to act. Hours into their journey, they reached a clearing that seemed strangely quiet. The man's senses immediately went on high alert. "Something isn't right," he murmured. She noticed his eyes scanning every shadow, every movement, every sound, looking for threats that were invisible to her. The jungle had been dangerous before, but now there was an unnatural stillness that pressed down on them. Suddenly, a rustle of leaves erupted nearby, and several humanoid figures emerged. They were not human, or at least not entirely. Their movements were strange, jerky, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. They carried crude weapons, but it was clear they were hunters, and they had been tracking the humans for some time. The man stepped in front of her, shielding her instinctively. "They're not ordinary predators," he said quietly. "Stay calm and follow my lead." The figures advanced, but the man did not hesitate. With swift, precise movements, he used the environment to his advantage. He threw branches and stones to create distractions, moved silently through shadows, and positioned the young woman behind cover. She watched him in awe, realizing that intelligence and strategy were far more effective than brute strength. The attackers, confused and frustrated by his tactics, hesitated. Seeing the opening, the man grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a narrow path hidden in the foliage. They ran through the dense jungle, moving quickly but carefully to avoid traps and pitfalls. Her heart raced, her muscles screamed, but she no longer doubted her ability to survive. Each step was a lesson in resilience, teaching her that humans could endure and adapt in ways that predators, even intelligent ones, could not anticipate. After what felt like hours, they reached a riverbank. The current was strong, and crossing it would be risky. But the man remained calm. He found a fallen tree spanning the river and tested its stability before guiding her across. Every movement required balance, strength, and trust. She stepped carefully, gripping his arm, feeling the power of human determination propelling them forward. Once across, they found temporary shelter in a natural cave hidden behind thick vines. They rested briefly, catching their breath, drying their clothes, and drinking from the river. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh but heavy with the scent of wet earth. She could see the man studying the surrounding area, noting every detail, every potential danger, and every escape route. She had learned to do the same, observing the jungle with new eyes, understanding that survival required constant awareness and intelligence. The next day, they continued their journey, moving toward a distant settlement the man had mentioned. Along the way, they encountered numerous challenges: predators, treacherous terrain, and unexpected obstacles. Each time, the man demonstrated the human ability to adapt. He built improvised tools, set clever traps, and found safe paths where none seemed to exist. She followed, learning not just to survive but to thrive in the wilderness, discovering her own inner strength. One afternoon, they came across a massive cliff overlooking a valley. The view was breathtaking but intimidating. Far below, they could see signs of civilization: small buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, and the faint glimmer of human activity. But reaching it required navigating a series of steep slopes and narrow ledges. The man studied the terrain carefully, calculating each step, and she mirrored his focus, trusting his judgment and her own newfound instincts. As they descended, a sudden noise behind them made her freeze. A large predator, far bigger and more aggressive than any they had encountered before, emerged from the shadows. Its eyes were fixed on them, and it moved with terrifying speed. The man's response was immediate. He picked up a heavy branch, positioning himself between the predator and her. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice steady. The predator lunged, and he dodged, striking with precision. The attack was calculated, not reckless, exploiting the creature's movements against itself. She watched, captivated, realizing that humans' greatest strength was not brute force. It was strategy, intelligence, and the ability to learn from experience. The predator hesitated, confused by their coordinated movements, and eventually retreated into the shadows, leaving them shaken but alive. Breathing heavily, she looked at him with admiration. You make it look easy," she said, though she knew it was far from easy. He smiled faintly. "Experience, observation, adaptation, that is what keeps humans alive." The valley below grew closer with each careful step. As they approached the settlement, they noticed signs of danger: smoke that smelled of fire, distant shouting, and the aftermath of conflict. The man remained vigilant, guiding her to a hidden path that led them safely into the outskirts. There, they discovered that the settlement had been attacked by a rival group, and the survivors were in desperate need of help. The man did not hesitate. He coordinated efforts to secure the area, using his knowledge of strategy and human cooperation to organize defenses and gather supplies. She joined him, using the skills she had learned in the jungle to assist. Together, they helped rebuild shelters, set traps to protect the settlement, and provided food and water to those in need. She realized that human strength was not only about surviving the wild, it was about working together, supporting one another, and using intelligence and courage to overcome challenges. Over the following days, she grew more confident and capable. The settlement began to thrive under their efforts, and she saw firsthand the power of human resilience. Even in the face of danger, scarcity, and adversity, people could endure, adapt, and succeed. The jungle had tested them, pushed them to the brink, and taught them lessons that no book or teacher could impart. One evening, as the sun set over the valley, the man and the young woman stood on a small hill overlooking the settlement. The fires burned softly below, and the sounds of rebuilding and laughter filled the air. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment and gratitude. She had been left to die, abandoned and alone, but through perseverance, courage, and the guidance of a human who refused to give up, she had not only survived, she had grown stronger. The man placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've come far," he said. "You've learned to survive, to adapt, and to endure. Remember this, humans are capable of more than they realize. Courage, intelligence, and determination can overcome even the greatest challenges." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep in her heart. The jungle, with all its dangers, had been a crucible that revealed the extraordinary potential within her. She understood now that survival was not simply about escaping danger. It was about embracing human ingenuity, resilience, and the unyielding drive to overcome obstacles. The days that followed brought more challenges, raiders from distant lands, sudden storms, and scarce resources, but she faced each one with newfound confidence. The skills she had learned, combined with the man's guidance, allowed them to protect the settlement and help the survivors thrive. She realized that humans were not just survivors. They were innovators, problem solvers, and leaders, capable of shaping their environment rather than being crushed by it. One morning, a scout returned with news that a larger threat was approaching, a group of hostile forces that had been hunting humans for territory and resources. The settlement's people were frightened, but the young woman and the man remained calm. They began to prepare defenses, fortifying the settlement and training the survivors in tactics, observation, and cooperation. She took a leading role, guiding others with confidence and clarity, demonstrating the lessons she had learned in the jungle. The day of the confrontation arrived. The hostile forces advanced, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they encountered a human force united by strategy, skill, and determination. Traps, ambushes, and clever maneuvers slowed and confused them. She fought alongside the man, using both physical skill and intelligence to outmaneuver the attackers. Humans proved unpredictable, adaptable, and fearless in ways the enemy had never anticipated. By nightfall, the hostile forces were defeated, retreating into the darkness. The settlement had survived, stronger and more united than before. The young woman stood among the survivors, exhausted but exhilarated. She realized that the true victory was not just in defeating the enemy. It was in proving what humans could accomplish when they combined courage, intelligence, and perseverance. In the days that followed, the settlement flourished. The jungle remained dangerous, but its threats were no longer insurmountable. Humans had learned to adapt, to protect each other, and to use their intelligence to survive and thrive. She reflected on her journey, from being left to die, abandoned and weak, to becoming a capable, resilient human who had helped save a community. The lessons she had learned, the strength she had discovered, and the courage she had gained were proof of humanity's incredible potential. One evening, she and the man sat on a hill overlooking the settlement. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and understanding. "I never thought I'd survive," she said softly. "You did," he replied. "And more than that, you grew stronger, wiser, and braver." That is what it means to be human, to endure, to learn, and to rise above every challenge. She looked at him, Realizing that the jungle, the dangers, and the struggles had not broken her, they had revealed the best of what humans could be. She had been left to die, but through resilience, courage, and guidance, she had discovered the true power of humanity. And as the stars emerged, twinkling above the vast jungle, she understood that no matter how harsh the world became, humans would always find a way to endure, adapt, and triumph. The jungle had tested them, but it had also shown that when humans refused to give up, they could overcome any challenge. For the first time, she felt a profound certainty. Humans were unstoppable, not because they were the strongest, but because they were determined, intelligent, and capable of extraordinary courage. She had survived not just because of luck, but because humanity itself was resilient, resourceful, and unyielding. The jungle stretched endlessly around them, wild and untamed, but she no longer feared it. She had learned to move with awareness, to think with clarity, and to act with courage. Humans had triumphed over the impossible, and she was living proof that no challenge was too great when faced with determination, intelligence, and hope. As she closed her eyes that night, she felt a quiet pride and unshakable confidence. The jungle was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but she knew one thing with certainty: humanity would endure, and she would survive not only in the wild but in any world that tested her strength, courage, and spirit. The man beside her smiled, knowing she had embraced the essence of human resilience. Together, they had faced the jungle, overcome threats, and proven that humans were capable of extraordinary feats. And in that moment, the young woman understood the ultimate truth. To be human was to survive, to adapt, and to triumph, no matter how impossible the challenge seemed.